They thought I was slipping. That age had made me soft, forgetful, easy to manage. My son sat across from me, papers in hand, rehearsed concern in his voice. His wife smiled like a nurse waiting for consent. But what they didn't know was that I had invited a notary and a banker into my living room that morning, not because I needed help, but because I was done pretending. While they spoke of my future, I was quietly documenting their betrayal. I may have played the role of a confused old woman, but I knew exactly what I was doing, and I wasn't signing anything. When you've spent decades building a life with someone, their absence never really stops echoing. Even after 3 years, I still catch myself setting out 2 cups of coffee in the morning like Robert might walk in from the garage, humming some old tune under his breath. But it's just me now in the house we built together. Our floors, our garden, our memories etched into every cabinet and crack. Sometimes I find myself talking to him out loud, especially on days when the silence presses too hard. That Saturday morning started just like any other. I was halfway through making toast, my slippers barely shuffling across the tile when the phone rang, startling enough at that hour that I nearly dropped the butter knife. It was 7 a.m. Carter's name lit up the screen. Carter never calls that early. In fact, Carter hardly calls at all unless he needs something fixed or forwarded. My first instinct was to panic. Something must have happened to Lily. But when I picked up, his voice was strangely upbeat. Too upbeat. "Hey, Mom, hope I didn't wake you." My heart slowed a little. "You did, actually." He gave a sheepish chuckle that felt rehearsed. Sorry. It's just... Well, Bella and I were hoping you'd come a little early today for Lily's birthday party." There was a beat of silence. That wasn't strange in itself. "I always attend Lily's birthdays. Never missed one." But Carter's tone was off. Too eager, too polished. It wasn't a son inviting his mother to a family gathering. It was a salesman warming up a pitch. "You've never had to convince me to come to my granddaughter's birthday," I said calmly, pouring coffee, as if my stomach hadn't suddenly twisted. "Right, no, of course," he stammered. "It's just, well, Bella really wanted to make sure you'd be there early. She's been planning this for weeks." Bella. That caught my attention. Let's just say Bella and I have always had what people politely call a polite relationship. On good days, we exchanged stiff smiles. On bad ones, she barely looked up from her phone when I walked into the room. She never really wanted anything to do with me. Especially not my early arrival. "I see," I said, stirring cream into my mug, slowly giving myself time to think. "That's thoughtful of her." "Yeah," Carter replied too quickly. "Yeah, she's excited. The party starts at 2, but if you could be here around 1:30, that would be great. There's some family stuff we want to chat about before everything gets started." Family stuff. I set my spoon down. In the 3 years since Robert passed, family stuff had never warranted a private conversation before a child's birthday. If anything, our family had become a string of small talk and surface-level check-ins. Birthday gifts, holiday cards, nothing deep, certainly nothing that required being pulled aside for a discussion. "What kind of family stuff?" I asked as casually as I could manage. Just planning things. Looking ahead. Bella has some ideas about how we can all stay more connected and supportive. Supportive. That word hung in the air like a fog. Bella's ideas about support had always somehow meant me supporting them. Emotionally, yes, but more often financially. A new fridge here, a down payment there, tuition bills. "It's for Lily," they'd always say. And I love that child more than life itself, so I never questioned it. At least not out loud. I walked to the window and stared across the street as Mrs. Halverson trimmed her rose bushes with her usual Saturday diligence. How many weekends had I spent keeping this house going, keeping Lily's world stable, keeping my son's head above water while pretending Bella's clipped words didn't sting? "That sounds nice," I said finally, careful to keep my voice even. "Great. So, we'll see you at 1:30. I looked at the fridge where Lily's latest crayon drawing was still held up by a magnet, a stick figure family under a crooked rainbow. Grandma was drawn in purple with a big smile. My name was always in purple. It used to be Robert's favorite color. Of course, I said, I'll be there. Awesome. And Mom Carter hesitated. Just keep an open mind, okay. We really just want what's best for everyone. The line went dead before I could ask what best for everyone actually meant. I stood there for a moment, phone still in hand, letting the silence of the house settle back around me. My gut, the same one that had guided me through years of raising a son, managing a home, surviving grief, it was twisting again. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. And I had learned, painfully slowly, that when something doesn't feel right, it usually isn't. But I would go. Of course I would. For Lily. For the little girl who still drew hearts around my name. I would show up, bring her gifts, and wear a smile that masked every warning bell ringing inside my head. I just wouldn't walk in blind. Not this time. Sunday mornings used to be for quiet breakfasts with Robert, the newspaper spread across the table and his reading glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose while he muttered about politics. Now, my Sundays were quieter, lonelier, filled with the kind of thoughts that crept in when no one else was around to distract you. After Carter's strange phone call, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tried to brush it away as I made a grocery list and finished my coffee, but the silence in the house made everything echo louder than usual, especially the doubts. I found myself mentally adding things up. Not groceries or errands, but the past 3 years. What I'd given, how easily I'd handed over help disguised as love. It started with a few $100s here and there, a car repair that turned into a new transmission, private school tuition for Lily because public school wasn't giving her what she needed, a temporary loan for groceries that somehow became monthly support. I'd stopped counting after $60,000. I suppose part of me didn't want to know the total. But now, with my gut warning me, I did the math. Over $70,000, all from what Robert and I had saved. For travel we never took. For retirement adventures that never happened. It had gone to Carter and Bella's family emergencies. And each time Carter had that same look, guilt shadowing his eyes like he hated asking. And Bella always knew exactly when to chime in with, "Thank you, Evelyn. We couldn't do this without you." She said it like it hurt her to admit it, like I was the one doing something inconvenient. But I clung to the hope that maybe deep down they were grateful, that they saw me, that they understood. I remember Robert's voice in moments like these, firm, low, always patient. "Don't let Carter's softness make you blind, Evie. He's good-hearted but not always strong, and weak people. They're easy to sway." I hadn't known what he meant at the time. Carter was just a young father trying his best. Bella was smart and organized, maybe a little cold but capable. And Lily, oh Lily, she was everything good and bright and worth believing in. But now I wondered if Robert had seen something back then that I didn't. Around 9, I decided to head out to the mall. I wanted to buy Lily something special for her birthday. Something more than a quick gift card or a generic doll. She deserved better than thoughtless last-minute purchases. The Lego store was already buzzing with families when I arrived. Parents trailed behind kids who darted between shelves wide-eyed and loud. I wandered toward the architecture section where I spotted a detailed Statue of Liberty set, over 1,000 pieces. The kind of gift that said, "I believe in your mind, not just your smile." Lily had always loved buildings. After her school visited the Space Needle last year, she drew towers on every scrap of paper she found. "I want to build big things," she'd told me once, her voice full of certainty. I bought the set and asked for it to be gift-wrapped. "It's for my granddaughter's birthday," I told the cashier, who smiled and told me it was a great choice. I left the store feeling good. For a moment, at least. On the way out, I passed a bike shop and stopped short. Lily had mentioned a few weeks ago that her old bike was getting too small. I remembered her words exactly. My knees hit the handles. "Grandma, I think I'm growing fast. There it was in the window. A sleek silver and purple Trek bike. Light enough for her to manage. Safe, sturdy, built to last. I didn't hesitate. Another purchase. Another joy for Lily. 2 large boxes. Later, I was struggling to fit everything into the back of my SUV when I heard a familiar voice. Evelyn. What a lovely surprise, I turned and smiled. Dorothy, fancy seeing you out so early. Dorothy Henderson had lived across the street from me for nearly 15 years. She had silver hair always neatly tucked back, and a warm way of making small talk feel like a hug. "Oh, you know me," she said, holding up a bookstore bag. "I like beating the crowds." I laughed softly. "Same here, just picking up a few things for Lily's birthday." "Oh yes, the party. Carter mentioned it when I saw him last week. That caught my ear." "He did." "Where did you see them downtown?" she said, as casually as if she were talking about the weather. "Tuesday morning, I believe. He and Bella were coming out of First National Bank with a big stack of papers. Looked quite official. I assumed it was refinancing or something." I stood still for a moment, one hand on the car hatch. Tuesday, 4 days ago. Carter hadn't said a word about any banking business. Not on the call, not ever. Probably just boring grown-up stuff, I said lightly, though my stomach twisted. Dorothy patted my arm. "None of my business, of course. But do give Lily a big birthday hug from me." "I will. Thanks, Dorothy." As she walked off toward the bookstore, I stood frozen beside my car. First National Bank. Stack of papers. 4 days ago. Suddenly, Carter's carefully chosen words from his call came rushing back. "Just some family stuff? Future planning? Bella has ideas." "No." I shook my head, willing the doubt away. "Surely not." But the unease crept deeper. I'd been through enough board meetings with Robert to know what a stack of papers at a bank usually meant. It wasn't just refinancing a car, and as I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the handlebar of Lily's new bike, something in my chest sank. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't afford to ignore it anymore. I arrived at Carter and Bella's house right at 1:30, just as I'd promised. The sun was bright, but there was a tightness in my chest that no warmth could ease. I pulled into the driveway slowly, letting the engine idle for a few seconds before turning it off. From the outside, the house looked cheerful. Streamers across the porch rail, a banner flapping over the front door that read, "Happy 8th birthday, Lily," in glittery purple letters. But something felt too polished, too curated, like it was staged for someone else's approval. As I stepped out of the car, I could already hear music drifting from inside. Upbeat a little too loud. I lifted the large gift bag from the passenger seat, adjusted the bike box in the trunk to sit more securely, and made my way up the walk. Before I could ring the bell, the door flew open. Evelyn Bella sang out my name like she'd been waiting by the window for the cue. "You look absolutely wonderful today." Her arms opened wide, and before I could react, she leaned in to give me a hug. Bella wasn't a hugger. At best, she was a polite nod and a step-back kind of person, but today she was radiant with a kind of overdone hospitality I didn't recognize. "Thank you," I said a bit stiffly. "You look lovely, too." I stepped into the house and was immediately surrounded by color. Balloons in every corner, themed decorations strung from wall to wall, unicorns and castles and gold foil confetti. It was far more elaborate than any previous birthday they'd thrown. I took in the centerpieces on the table, the food spread with tiny chalkboard signs, the professional-looking cake. "You really went all out," I said. "Oh, well, it's her 8th. "That's a big deal, right?" Bella replied. Her tone light, but just a touch too eager. "We just wanted everything to be perfect." "Mission accomplished," I murmured. Carter appeared from the living room, arms wide, voice booming. "There she is. The woman who taught me everything I know. Come in, Mom. Everyone's dying to meet you." He clapped a hand on my shoulder and steered me toward a tall man in a blazer who stood nursing a beer near the fireplace. "Mike, this is my mom." The one I always talk about. Brilliant, determined, sharp as ever. I blinked at the performance. Carter had never introduced me like that before, especially not to colleagues. In fact, I distinctly remembered him once telling me not to bring up my past business dealings at his office barbecue because it might make people uncomfortable. Mike smiled politely and extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Price. Carter's told me so much about you." "All of it true, I'm sure," I replied, shaking his hand. "Though I imagine the stories get more flattering with time." Mike chuckled a bit awkwardly and glanced at Carter, who beamed like a man running for office. "I was just telling Mike how you built a construction business from the ground up," Carter added. "You taught me everything I know about leadership, about planning, about loyalty." That word, loyalty, landed oddly, like he'd plucked it from a speech rather than his heart. I offered a small smile, but inside I was taking note. Everything about this was staged. From Bella's sugary warmth to Carter's exaggerated praise. It felt less like a birthday party and more like a production. A show for an audience I didn't know I was part of. Suddenly I felt a tug at my skirt. Grandma Lily barreled into me, arms wrapping around my waist. My heart softened the moment I saw her. Her eyes lit up with joy, but as she pulled back, I saw something else flicker. Something I couldn't name yet. Worry, maybe. Or guilt. It passed too quickly to grasp, and she smiled up at me again. "I missed you," she said. "I missed you more, sweetheart," I replied, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Your presents are in the car. One's small and one's... well, you'll see." Her eyes widened. "Can I see them now?" "Soon. Let's let your party guests enjoy you first." "Okay," she said, then leaned in and whispered, "I'm really glad you came early." I raised an eyebrow, but before I could ask more, Bella swooped in like a breeze. "Isn't she just the sweetest Lily Go show, Grandma, the table you helped decorate?" As Lily took my hand to lead me into the kitchen, I saw Carter and Bella exchange a glance behind my back. Quick, intentional, unreadable. It was the third time in 10 minutes that I'd seen that same exchange. Like they were silently cueing each other for the next move. The kitchen was bursting with trays of food, tiny sandwiches cut into stars, cookies shaped like crowns, fruit kebabs arranged by color. Bella hovered at my side. "I made the canapes myself," she said brightly. "I thought you'd appreciate something light but elegant. You have such sophisticated tastes." I blinked at her. Since when did Bella care about what I preferred? "They look lovely," I said, picking one up to be polite. She hovered, refilled my wine glass, and asked if I was warm enough if I wanted a chair if the music was too loud. "Bella!" The woman who once rolled her eyes when I asked for a blanket during a cold Christmas visit was now treating me like delicate china. From across the room I saw Carter laughing a little too loudly at something Mike said. When another guest mentioned something about retirement planning, he quickly steered the conversation toward Lily's softball schedule. They were managing the party like a press conference, avoiding certain subjects, guiding attention, performing. And somewhere behind all the decorations and niceties, I knew I was being studied, positioned. I didn't know yet what the end game was, but I knew I wasn't just a guest anymore. I was part of the script. At some point between Bella's third refill of my wine glass and Carter's sixth compliment about my sharp mind, I realized I needed a break. Or rather, I needed space to think without being watched like a patient in a waiting room. I excused myself politely, murmuring something about needing the restroom. Bella jumped up to offer directions, despite the fact that I'd been to this house more times than I could count. Her tone was saccharine sweet, her smile too wide, too rehearsed. I nodded and thanked her, even though my legs already knew the hallway by heart. As I stepped away from the noise of the party, the atmosphere shifted. The hall was lined with family photos, all perfectly framed, perfectly arranged. One of them showed Carter holding Lily as a baby, both of them wrapped in a blanket I'd knit. Another, more recent, showed Bella standing in front of their newly remodeled kitchen, hands clasped like she owned the world. I took a slow breath. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt like I could hear myself think. and then I heard the soft patter of footsteps behind me. I turned gently. Lily stood there halfway down the hall, her small hands clasped in front of her. Her eyes scanned the living room quickly, then met mine. "Grandma," she whispered. I crouched to her level immediately. "What is it, sweetheart? Are you okay?" She hesitated, glancing once more over her shoulder. When she stepped closer, her voice dropped to the tiniest whisper. "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped. Last night, she said, barely audible, "I heard Mommy and Daddy talking when they thought I was asleep." I nodded, keeping my face calm. "Okay." "They said they were going to take your house. And your money." "Mommy said you have too much and it's not fair. She said they'd fix that tonight." The hallway seemed to tilt. I reached out and steadied myself against the wall, keeping my other hand on Lily's arm to ground us both. "Are you sure that's what you heard?" I asked softly. She nodded quickly. "Daddy sounded scared. He said, 'What if she finds out?' But Mommy said it would be too late. She had papers from the bank. She said everything would be legal." I felt a slow, cold wave rise in my chest, like a tide pulling me under. Papers, legal documents, Bella's fake warmth, Carter's sudden flattery, the oversized decorations, the guest list, the wine, the carefully managed conversations. Every moment of the party began to reframe itself with alarming clarity. They weren't just buttering me up. They were preparing me, softening me for something I never imagined I'd face. Not from my own blood. "They're going to do it after the party," Lily whispered. "When everyone goes home." I looked at her, this small, brave child with her grandmother's heart and her mother's eyes. She wasn't trembling, but I could see the weight she was carrying behind those long lashes. No child should bear it. "Oh, Lily," I murmured. She blinked quickly, and for a second I saw tears welling up. "I don't want them to do it," she said. "You're the only one who really listens to me." I reached out and pulled her into my arms. Her body was warm, slightly shaky. I held her close, as if I could shield her from the weight of what she knew, and the world she was still learning to understand. "You did the right thing, sweetheart," I whispered into her hair. "You were very brave to tell me." She didn't speak, just nodded into my shoulder. But I added gently, "For now, let's keep this between us, just for a little while. Can you do that?" She pulled back just enough to look at me. "Will you stop them?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'm going to handle everything, but we have to act normal for now. Can you be brave for me a little longer?" "I think so," she said. "Will you still love me if Mommy and Daddy get mad?" The question pierced through every ounce of composure I had left. I placed both hands on her shoulders, looked into her eyes, and said, "Lily, nothing your parents do will ever change how much I love you. Nothing. Do you understand?" Her face lit up with relief. "I love you too, Grandma. Yeah." And in that moment, with the party noise faint behind us and the air heavy with secrets, I knew everything had changed. The son I raised, the daughter-in-law I tolerated, the family I thought I could support, could hold together. They were no longer the center of my loyalty. This child, this quiet, honest voice in a sea of manipulation, she was my compass now. I kissed her forehead and stood smoothing my blouse and blinking back tears. "Come on," I said gently. "Let's go open your presents." We walked back down the hallway hand in hand, but the warmth I'd brought into that house had turned into something colder. Determined. Awake. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was restless or overwhelmed, but because everything inside me had finally snapped into place. The moment Lily whispered those words, it was as if a light had flipped on in a dark room I'd been standing in far too long. All the uneasy glances, the unnatural affection, the guarded conversations, they weren't paranoia, they were patterns. And I had ignored them because I wanted to believe in my family. I came home after the party, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the middle of my living room for a long time, just listening to the silence. the house no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a witness. It had heard every excuse I accepted. It had held me through every quiet ache, and tonight it would hold me through my awakening. I went into the office, the one Robert and I had once used to run the business. Price Construction. That room had always smelled faintly of cedar and printer ink. I sat at the old wooden desk and opened the file drawer on the left. Inside were years of folders, each labeled in Robert's tidy handwriting. But what I was looking for wasn't in those files. I stood crossed to the painting above the bookcase and gently lifted it off the wall. Behind it was a safe. Nothing fancy, but solid. Robert had installed it himself after someone broke into the neighbor's house back in '92. I spun the combination. 18, 19, 59, 18 for our wedding date, 19 for Carter's birthday, 59 for the year Robert was born. The door clicked open. Inside were the documents I hadn't touched in years. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, and a few old letters Robert had written me in college. I pulled everything out and brought it to the desk. Then I started counting, line by line, transfer by transfer, every tuition check, every car repair, every utility bill I paid when they were between jobs, every time Bella had said, "We'll pay you back next month," and Carter had lowered his eyes in shame. 2 hours in, I had recorded 247 transactions, $72,421 and change. And that didn't even include the unpaid interest or the groceries, the school supplies, or the home upgrades I funded to help Lily feel comfortable. I sat back, stared at the number, and felt a strange sense of calm. Not anger. Not even regret. Just clarity. They didn't take advantage of me overnight. They trained me to say yes. They made it feel like helping. At 11:38 p.m., I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a long while. David Harmon. A groggy voice answered. "David, it's Evelyn Price. I'm sorry to call so late." There was a pause, then warmth. "Evie, it's been ages. Don't worry. What's going on? I need to ask you something. Off the record." "Go ahead. If someone wanted to declare an elderly family member mentally incompetent, what would they need? What kind of legal steps?" There was another pause. Longer this time. "Why do you ask?" I hesitated, then told him everything. At least the essentials. Carter and Bella's behavior, the bank visit Dorothy saw, the sudden party invitation, Lily's whisper. David listened quietly, then said, "They were here last Tuesday. Together. Asked very specific questions about conservatorship, guardianship law, and power of attorney. They wanted to know how quickly it could all be processed." I closed my eyes for a second. They said they were helping a relative manage things, he continued. But I had a strange feeling. Bella did most of the talking. She was prepared. Used legal terms I rarely hear outside court. Would what they're planning be legal, I asked? Depends. If you were truly incapacitated, yes. But if you're of sound mind, and I know you, Evie, you are, they'd need to fabricate or manipulate medical opinions. It's not impossible. It's been done before, especially if the person being targeted doesn't fight back. I smiled despite the sick feeling in my gut. Then they're going to be disappointed. He chuckled. "Need help, I need a witness." "Consider me there." We agreed to meet in the morning. After I hung up, I stared at the phone for a moment longer, then reached for my second call. Rebecca Stone. She'd been the notary for our business contracts back in the day. Trustworthy, discreet, and smart enough to smell trouble from across the room. She answered on the second ring. "Rebecca, it's Evelyn Price. Do you still handle personal notary requests?" "Of course, what do you need? I have some family paperwork that might be sensitive. I'd appreciate your professional discretion." "You've always had it." "When tomorrow?" 10 a.m. My house, I'll be there." When I hung up, I looked at the list on my desk. 247 payments, 3 rental properties, one fully owned home, and more than $2 million in liquid assets. More than they could steal in one night. More than I was willing to let them destroy. Robert had once told me we built this so we could rest, not so someone else could spend it. He was right, and in the morning they were going to find out just how sharp an old woman can be when she stops apologizing for her strength. The phone call had to be just right. Not too lucid, not too confident. Just enough hesitation to make Carter believe the cracks were showing. I waited until the house was quiet, until I'd practiced the tone once or twice out loud. Then I picked up the phone and dialed his number. "Mom?" He answered a bit too fast. He must have seen my name and hoped for this. "Carter," I said softly, letting a breath catch in my throat. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how maybe I need help. You might be right." There was a pause. Then relief. It practically poured through the line. "I'm so glad to hear you say that, Mom. Really, Bella and we've just been worried about you. We want to help." I added a touch of confusion to my voice. Everything's felt a little fuzzy lately. I guess I just didn't want to admit it. "Don't worry," he said gently. You don't have to handle everything alone anymore. We'll come over tomorrow. We have some papers that will make things easier. Just simple stuff to help us support you better." "Okay," I murmured. "That sounds fine. 10 o'clock work for you?" "That's perfect." After we hung up, I didn't move for a moment. My fingers rested lightly on the phone, my heart steady. There was no satisfaction in playing weak, no pleasure in hearing my son lie so smoothly. But there was something else. Resolve. And that was more powerful than anger. I woke early the next morning, not out of nervousness, but purpose. The air in the house felt different, like it understood this wasn't just another day. It was reckoning day. By 7, I had already laid out everything: the binder of financial records, the stack of investment statements, the printed email confirmations, the photocopied checks. I organized everything across the long oak desk Robert and I used to share. Him drawing site plans, me balancing ledgers. The desk faced the window, which let in soft morning light. On one side, I placed a leather chair for myself. Across from it, 2 straight-backed chairs. Nothing too comfortable. I wanted them alert. By 8:30, the coffee was brewed and the living room was tidy. I checked the placement of every document one last time. Then I sat at the desk, hands folded, waiting. Rebecca arrived at 9:45, punctual as always. She wore a tailored navy suit and carried a sleek black notary case. "Good morning, Evelyn," she greeted me with a firm handshake. "This is quite the setup." "It needed to be," I said, offering her coffee. "You'll understand soon enough." She raised an eyebrow but didn't press. I appreciated that about Rebecca. She knew when to ask questions, and when to keep her pen capped. At 9:58, the doorbell rang again. David Harmon stood on my porch, briefcase in one hand, warm smile in place. "Evie," he said, stepping inside, "I see you're still more prepared than half the people I deal with at the bank." "Old habits die hard," I replied. He took one look at the layout and nodded approvingly. "You've built a fine little courtroom here. That's the idea." We were seated and settled when, right on cue at 10 o'clock, the knock came. A beat later, Carter and Bella walked in. They looked triumphant. Carter wore his best khakis, the kind he saved for interviews or court dates. Bella, in a blush pink blouse, clutched a leather portfolio like it held a winning lottery ticket. Mom, Carter said brightly, "You look rested." I gave him a faint smile. "Morning, dear. Come in." They hesitated slightly when they saw Rebecca and David seated on either side of me. Bella recovered first. "Oh, you invited professionals? That's so smart. It'll make everything more official." "Yes," I said calmly. "That was my thought exactly." Carter's eyes flicked toward David, who gave him a polite nod, and then to Rebecca, who was already flipping open her notary journal with smooth efficiency. "We, brought the paperwork," Bella said, tapping the folder in her arms. "It's just a few forms. Power of attorney for medical and financial decisions, healthcare directives, and a shared account authorization. Standard stuff." "I see," I said, not touching the folder she slid across the desk. And what exactly do these forms allow you to do? Well, Carter said, stepping into the role he'd clearly rehearsed. They allow us to help manage your affairs. Nothing drastic, just in case things get harder for you. So we can protect you. From myself, I asked, tilting my head slightly. From stress, Bella interjected smoothly. From confusion. You said it yourself yesterday. You've been feeling a little off. Yes, I replied. I did say that. I picked up the folder. My hands were steady. I opened the first page. Legal language, highlighted signature lines, witness requirements neatly marked. Someone had paid for good counsel. I closed the folder slowly. Before we go any further, I said, looking at David, there's something I need to clarify. David leaned forward slightly. Go ahead. I turned to Carter and Bella. Did you tell the bank that I was mentally incompetent? Carter blinked. What David spoke calmly. Last Tuesday, both of you visited First National Bank. You asked specific questions about conservatorship emergency procedures and legal authority over a senior family member. Bella's smile faltered for the first time. That was just curiosity. We were trying to understand the options. I turned to Rebecca. Do these documents grant full legal control over my finances? She examined them quickly, then nodded. Yes. If signed, they would authorize Carter and Bella to manage your accounts transfer funds and make medical decisions on your behalf. I let the silence settle like dust. Then I looked back at my son. I'm not confused, Carter. I'm not forgetful. I'm not lost. But I am done pretending not to notice what you've become. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. I gestured to the folder. These forms were meant to strip me of my independence. You planned this with precision. I gave you my trust and you mistook it for permission. Bella stood quickly. This is ridiculous. We're trying to help. I shook my head. No. You're trying to take... But you came to the wrong house with the wrong plan. And tomorrow, I thought silently, you'll see what happens when an old woman stops being afraid to draw the line. Bella placed the leather folder in front of me as though she were presenting a gift. She smiled with a kind of sugary calm that reminded me of the way a nurse might talk to someone who'd forgotten their own name. These are just to make things easier, Evelyn, she said, sliding the documents across the desk, neatly aligned. I looked down at them without touching. Rebecca had already uncapped her pen and opened her journal, eyes scanning the forms with a calm professionalism. David sat quietly to my left hands, folded, observing. Carter stood just behind Bella, his posture trying to strike a balance between helpful son and composed executor. I saw the confidence in his stance. He believed this was going to be easy. Expected it even. Bella leaned in slightly. If you just sign here, we can get things filed today. Then you don't have to worry about any of it anymore. We'll take care of everything from now on. I let my eyes linger on the yellow highlighted signature lines. Power of attorney, both financial and medical, guardianship requests. Authorization for joint banking access. I picked up the pen with my right hand and let it tremble just slightly, enough to match their expectations. Rebecca cleared her throat gently. Evelyn, she said, her voice calm but clear. Do you understand what you're signing today? I looked up at her, blinked once as though I needed a moment to gather myself. Then I smiled faintly. I believe so, I said in a soft, wavering tone. Carter stepped forward slightly, the encouragement already ready on his lips. That's when I straightened in my chair. My voice came out firm, steady, unapologetic. In fact, I understand exactly what this is, I said. And I have witnesses. The silence in the room changed instantly. Rebecca's pen froze midair. Carter's jaw tightened. Bella's smile evaporated like steam. I know about your visit to First National Bank last Tuesday, I continued. I know you asked about guardianship laws, conservatorship requirements, and mental competency procedures. Carter's eyes darted to David, whose expression remained neutral. Bella opened her mouth. That was just research. You told us you were confused. I never told you I was incompetent, I said flatly. There's a difference. And what you did wasn't concern. It was planning. David cleared his throat, finally speaking. They were very specific in their questions, he said evenly. They wanted to know how fast the process could move. What documents were required to gain legal control over a senior family member's finances? I never said that, Carter blurted. I never used Mom's name. You didn't have to, David replied. You made your intentions very clear. Rebecca slowly closed her notary journal and capped her pen. Then she looked at Carter and Bella, her expression sharp and measured. As a certified notary, she said, I am legally and ethically obligated to confirm that the signer understands the documents and is signing willingly without pressure or coercion. She turned to me. Mrs. Price, are you feeling pressured right now? I held her gaze. Not anymore. Then she looked directly at Carter. Given the context that's now been presented and the possible intent behind these forms, I cannot proceed with notarizing them. Bella took a step back. This is ridiculous. You're making it sound like we're criminals. Rebecca didn't flinch. I'm saying I have reasonable doubt. That's enough to stop this process. Carter looked completely thrown. We were just trying to help. No, I said, standing now, my hand resting on the edge of the desk. You were trying to help yourselves, and you thought I wouldn't notice. You mistook my kindness for weakness and my silence for ignorance. The heat rose in Bella's cheeks. She looked to Carter for backup, but he had none to offer. I've supported you both for years, I continued. Paid your bills, your repairs, your daughter's tuition, and I never asked for anything back. But this planning to take over my accounts, my life, this crosses a line that can't be stepped back from with an apology. Bella crossed her arms. We were trying to keep you safe. You said you were forgetting things. I forgot who I raised, I said quietly. That's the only thing I was confused about. Rebecca packed her things efficient and silent. David stood as well, offering me a respectful nod. I've seen many things in my years, he said to Carter. But watching a child plan to take everything from a living, breathing, thinking parent, that's not protection. That's betrayal. The room stayed quiet as he walked out. Bella broke first. This is still your family, Evelyn. Yes, I said. And family protects each other. They don't plan behind closed doors how to take everything from the person who gave them everything. Carter looked at me, something flickering behind his eyes. Shame, maybe, or just realization. Mom, he said softly, we didn't think. That I interrupted is exactly the problem. I turned to Rebecca. Thank you for coming. I'm just glad you had the sense to call someone, she said. Most people don't know until it's too late. As she walked toward the door, Carter and Bella stayed frozen, the folder still lying unopened in front of me, signatures never earned. When the door closed behind them, I sat back down at my desk. I looked at the pile of documents I'd prepared the night before, the ones they hadn't expected. The evidence, the transfer records, my revised will. And I realized the trap they set had snapped shut, just not on the person they intended. I let the silence stretch for a moment, just long enough for Carter and Bella to feel it settle in heavy and undeniable. They stood where they'd been rooted since Rebecca closed her notary journal, and David confirmed what they both had tried so hard to conceal. But now there was nowhere to hide. Their plan had unraveled right in front of them, and I hadn't raised my voice once. I turned to the side drawer of my desk and pulled out a crisp folder, the kind Robert and I used for final contract packets back when we ran the company. I laid it down gently on the desk, flipping it open with a careful hand. My fingers didn't shake. Not anymore. This, I said quietly, is my revised will. Carter's face paled. Bella's jaw tightened. I updated it this week, I continued. Filed it with my attorney yesterday morning. Copies have already been notarized and shared with my legal and financial advisors. What's in it? Carter asked, though I could tell by his tone he already sensed the answer. I met his eyes. Everything. The house, the 3 rental properties, the investment accounts, and yes, the $2.3 million in liquid assets you didn't know I still had. All of it has been placed into a trust. Carter blinked. A trust, I nodded. A protected educational trust. For Lily, Bella scoffed. You're giving everything to a child. I'm protecting it for a child, I said firmly. She'll have access when she turns 21. For her education, her first home a business if she wants to start one. Whatever path she chooses, she'll have the means to pursue it, and she won't have to rely on anyone who sees her as a bargaining chip. Carter sank slowly into the nearest chair as if his knees had given out. Mom, you can't. Please don't do this. We can fix this. We can talk about it. You had years to talk to me. Carter, I said, you had all the chances in the world to act like a son, to ask to tell the truth. Instead, you schemed. You plotted. You tried to take from me before I was even gone. His voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was scared. Bella said, I raised my hand. Stop! He fell silent. I looked over at Bella, who hadn't sat down. Her arms were crossed tightly across her chest. You're destroying this family, she hissed. This is manipulation, Evelyn. Do you even hear yourself? You're dividing your own son from his future, from everything he's worked for. I felt something rise in my chest, not anger but conviction. No, I said. I'm protecting the only thing left in this family worth saving. Bella laughed bitterly. Lily, she's a child. You think cutting us off and putting everything in her name is going to raise her better than we could? I think, I said calmly, that if you ever saw her the way I do, if you listened to her the way I do, you'd know why I'm doing this. Bella's voice rose. You're playing favorites with a child. No, I said. I'm playing defense against two adults who've shown me they're willing to betray their own blood to get what they want. Carter looked up again. Is there anything we can do to change your mind? I let the question sit before answering. Yes, I said. You have 1 year. They both blinked. 1 year, I repeated, to prove that you're capable of being the kind of parents Lily deserves, to prove that you can provide for her, love her, support her, not with my money, but with your own hands, your own work, your own heart. Bella's voice turned sharp. And if we don't, then you don't get a dime, I said. Not now. Not ever. Carter leaned forward, his voice quiet, desperate. What does that look like, Mom? What do we have to do? Live honestly, I said. Get jobs that actually support your household. Pay your own bills. Show Lily what it means to take responsibility instead of shifting blame. And most of all, stop using her as leverage. Bella opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. This isn't a negotiation, I said. This is a boundary. One I should have set a long time ago. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator in the hallway. The same kitchen Robert and I had stood in together countless times, making plans, dreaming of grandkids, wondering what kind of legacy we'd leave behind. Well, I knew now. Lily would have safety, freedom, opportunity. She wouldn't have to grow up learning how to manipulate or tiptoe around fragile egos. She'd know that strength could be quiet, and that love didn't mean enabling destruction. Bella turned toward the door, her heels clicking hard against the floor. You'll regret this, she muttered. I didn't respond. Some things don't deserve answers. Carter hesitated, then stood and looked at me one more time. I am sorry, Mom. I just hope it's not too late. I didn't say it out loud, but in my heart I knew it wasn't me who had something to prove anymore. It was him. It was both of them. And for once I was okay letting them carry the weight of their own decisions. They left without another word. I stayed seated at the desk looking at the folder in front of me. The paperwork that finally reflected not just my finances, but my values. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. It wasn't punishment. It was a promise. To Lily, to Robert, and to myself. That legacy wouldn't be about what was given. It would be about what was earned. The house was quiet again, not the heavy, anxious quiet of before, but something gentler, settled. I sat on the couch with a cup of tea cooling in my hands, the afternoon sun slowly stretching across the living room floor. Outside, birds chirped softly from the backyard oak, and the faint sound of wind brushing through the grass reminded me that the world kept moving no matter how much had changed. I heard the front door open with a careful creak. Grandma Lily's voice was soft but certain. "In here, sweetheart," I called. She walked in, still wearing her party dress, now wrinkled from a long day. Her backpack hung off one shoulder and her hair had come loose from its ribbon. She looked like a little girl trying to carry something far too big. She settled beside me, folding her legs under her. We sat in silence for a moment. I didn't rush her. Then she asked, "Are they mad at you?" I knew who she meant, but I let her say it her way. "They're confused," I said, "and maybe a little ashamed. But that's not your fault." Lily looked down at her hands. "Are they gonna be punished?" Her voice wobbled slightly. I reached out and took her hand in mine. "Not punished," I said gently, "but they do need to learn. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and the only way to fix them is to start over. Differently. They'll have to learn how to be better. Not because someone's punishing them, but because it's the right thing to do." She nodded slowly, thinking. "I heard Mommy crying," she said quietly. "In the car, on the way home, I squeezed her hand. Grown-ups cry too when they're scared, or when they realize they've hurt someone they love." She leaned her head on my arm. "Is it bad that I told you?" "No," I said softly. "It was brave. You told the truth because your heart knew something was wrong. That's not bad, Lily. That's good. That's strong." We sat there a little longer, just breathing in the quiet. Then she lifted her head, eyes brighter. "Grandma, yes. Do you think I could really go to vet school someday? Like, a real one, with big animals and everything?" I smiled. "Of course you can." She hesitated. "But they're really expensive, right? Like, crazy expensive." I set my tea down and turned fully to face her. "Lily," I said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, "you can be anything you want to be. And no matter how much it costs, I've made sure you'll have what you need. Not just money, but safety, time, support. The kind of foundation that lets you dream big without worrying if someone will pull it away." She blinked. "Even if I change my mind and want to be something else, especially then," I said, "because that's what growing up is. Trying, changing, learning. You don't owe anyone one perfect plan. You just need to keep being curious, keep being you." She smiled, and for the first time all day it was full and carefree. "Can we look at some schools?" she asked. I reached over and grabbed the laptop from the side table. "Let's start a list." We opened it together, and I typed "Best Veterinary Schools in the U.S." into the search bar. She leaned forward with a spark of focus in her eyes I hadn't seen since her last art project. We clicked through images of campuses, students in scrubs holding puppies and goats. Classrooms full of microscopes and notebooks. "Ooh, that one has horses," she said, pointing. "And that one has a wildlife program," I added. She looked up at me. "What about college dorms? Are they scary?" I chuckled. "They're noisy, usually messy and full of late-night pizza. But no, not scary. Just another place to grow." She giggled, then clicked through more pictures. "I think I want one with trees. And maybe snow." We added a few schools to a spreadsheet she insisted we name Lily's Vet Path. I leaned back, letting her drive the conversation. My eyes drifted for a moment to the photograph on the wall. Robert mid-laugh holding a fishing pole standing next to a 7-year-old Carter on a dock. The sunlight was catching the glass just right, giving it a soft glow. I thought of what Robert would say if he were here. Maybe nothing. He'd just squeeze my hand and nod the way he always did when he knew I'd done something hard and necessary. Lily noticed where I was looking. "That's Grandpa Robert, right?" I nodded. "Yes. He would have loved you so much. Do you think he'd be proud of me?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a warmth rise from somewhere deep. "He already is." We sat for a while longer watching videos of animal rescues, laughing at goats in pajamas, talking about the difference between a zoologist and a veterinarian. Outside, the wind had calmed. The house felt full again, not because of noise or people, but because of something steadier, something rooted. Later, as I closed the laptop and Lily tucked her feet under a blanket, she looked up at me and asked, "Are we okay now?" I wrapped my arm around her. "We're better than okay. We're starting over. Together. And this time, no one would rewrite our story without asking first." That evening, the house was quiet again, not with tension or suspicion, but with the kind of silence that feels earned. The windows were cracked just enough to let in the cool night air, and the soft hum of distant crickets brought a rhythm to the stillness. I sat at my writing desk, a small amber lamp casting a pool of light onto the paper in front of me. My pen moved slowly, deliberately. This wasn't an email or a typed memo. This had to be written by hand. "Dear Robert," I began. It felt strange at first, writing to someone who was no longer here. But I had done it before in the first few months after he passed, back when grief hadn't found its place in me yet, back when I still reached for his coffee cup out of habit. But this letter felt different. It wasn't about sorrow, it was about completion. I made a promise to you, I wrote my hand steady. The night before you passed, when you could barely speak, you squeezed my hand and whispered, "Take care of our family. Especially Lily." I nodded. "I told you I would, and I meant it." I paused, pressing the side of my pen against the page. My eyes wandered to the photo on the far bookshelf. Robert in his favorite sweater arms wrapped around a young Carter, both of them laughing mid-motion like someone had captured joy in a jar. "When I said I'd protect the family, I thought I meant keeping us together," I continued. "But I realize now protection doesn't always look like closeness. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Sometimes love means stepping in between what's easy and what's right." I sat back for a moment and let the words breathe. The events of the last few days flickered through my mind, not in sharp flashes, but in layered memories. Carter's false concern, Bella's carefully chosen words, Lily's tiny voice in that hallway, trembling, but brave, Rebecca's clear refusal, David's steady confirmation, the way the truth had quietly filled the room until there was no room left for lies. I reached for a second sheet of paper, this one for my attorney. I kept the note short, formal, to the point. I confirmed that all changes to the estate were made with full clarity of mind and legal counsel. The trust for Lily remains irrevocable unless otherwise reviewed after her 21st birthday. All prior versions of my will are null and void. Please acknowledge receipt and proceed with final documentation. I folded both letters carefully, placed them in separate envelopes, and sealed them, one addressed to my attorney, one without a label that I tucked into the back of Robert's old journal, where I kept the letters he once wrote me before we were even married. The act of sealing those envelopes felt final in the most freeing way. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't retaliation. It was simply a return. To myself, to my values, to the woman Robert knew me to be before grief and obligation softened my edges. I walked through the house, slowly turning off lights one by one, brushing my hand along the hallway photos as I passed. Lily's laughter still echoed faintly in the corners, and that sound alone reminded me why everything I'd done mattered. I stopped at the door of the guest room where Lily slept that night, curled up with the stuffed dog I gave her for her 4th birthday. Her breath rose and fell in the steady rhythm of childhood sleep, completely unaware of how close she'd come to losing something she didn't even know she was about to inherit. I closed the door gently. Back in my room, I changed into my nightgown and pulled back the covers. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't lie awake with my mind racing or heart aching. I didn't replay what I should have said or how I might have done more, or whether I had failed someone by loving too much. Instead, I exhaled. I didn't lose my son. I lost the illusion that he was still the boy I once protected. And maybe, just maybe, this space would give him the chance to find his way back to that boy again. If he was willing to change, I hadn't locked the door behind him. But I wasn't standing there holding it open anymore either. This time he'd have to knock, and I would decide whether to answer. I pulled the comforter up around my shoulders and turned off the lamp. The room faded into darkness, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like mine again. Just before I drifted to sleep, I whispered into the quiet, not expecting a reply but needing to say it anyway. I kept my promise, Robert. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept through the night. If this story touched something in your heart, you're not alone. So many parents and grandparents give without limits, hoping love will be enough. But what happens when that love is taken for granted? Have you ever had to draw a line with someone you once trusted? Have you ever stood up quietly, not out of anger, but to protect your peace? We'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Your voice matters, and someone out there might need to hear it. If you found strength in Evelyn's journey, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story of quiet power, deep love, and emotional truth. Thank you for being here.